It's time for some more looks at football year by year in a Football History Rewind, part number 38 of this series, as we look at the season of 1918 and all the special circumstances that made it truly unique. Well, we may remember some of them because we lived through some similar things, but we'll come up with 1918 season and more coming up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with PigskinDispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And we are back with part number 38 of our Football History Rewind, where we go through football seasons of year by year, discussing all the highlights and rule changes and players and teams that really had an effect on each season of football. And we are all the way up in the year 1918. And it's a very interesting study. And if you remember, when we left off back in the 1917 season, it focused mainly on the legendary John Heisman and his tenure with the national championship with Georgia Tech's Golden Tornadoes, as they were called at the time. And in this edition, we'll zip the reader back to the year of 1918 and the football developments of that season. And we have a couple of factors to talk about because it's really kind of a unique season. Well, when we say unique, maybe not so much after what the world has gone through the last couple of years here, but the Spanish flu pandemic was at its height during the fall of 1918. And the impact of the pandemic was rampant and almost forgotten until COVID-19 ran a similar path on the world in the 21st century. I think we all remember that and what it did to everything in life, including playing football. Well, the effect on sports included a list of cancellations, travel restrictions, and schedule changes. Even the World Series was played earlier in an abbreviated season in the month of September in fear of the infectious disease. Now, that sounds very familiar to us too, doesn't it? Limitations on crowd sizes and the amount of men on a roster changed the norms of the gridiron game that year. Heck, there were even old photographs of folks at college games, very sparse crowds at that, wearing masks up in the stands, and you could have probably put that same photograph 100 years later in 2020, and it would look very, very similar to the games played there. And the flu spread was not the only element changing football in the year of 1918, though, because the nation was ready for war. Yes, the United States' involvement in the Great War was imminent. The arguments of the isolationists were starting to be drowned out by the cries of Americans' European allies who were battling the powerful Axis nations. The U.S. government saw the writing on the wall and was preparing this nation for war. Many schools and young men were doing their part in preparation as well. Some schools, including Cornell and Yale, did not even field a football team in 1918 due directly to the conflict over in Europe. The Army-Navy game was canceled that year, and as a matter of fact, Army played only one game that entire season, which was a 20-0 romp over Mitchell Field. This was not a situation centered just in the East, though, as other schools such as Louisiana State, Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina put football aside that season as well. The Pacific Coast Conference and the Southwest Conference awarded no championship banners that season, as many questionable freshmen and military personnel were fielded by participating teams. During that era of football, freshmen were not eligible to play, but the wartime preparations made for the special circumstantial arrangement to let them play on the varsity squad due to the lack of eligible players to compete that season. Now, we also have to talk about, Pop Warner and his great Pitt University squads were positioned as a team to beat that season. Their winning streak was into its fourth season, and the way they were playing, it did not look like that it would end soon because and it did in a very controversial way during a postseason game. Warner's squad was pitted against the Cleveland Naval Reserve. The Panthers started out strong as they scored in the first 6 minutes of the game by using their powerful formations and strategies, along with the very able-bodied runners Joe Guyon and Buck Flowers. Now, we've talked about Joe Guyon at the professional level, but remember, he played under the great Pop Warner at Pitt. Now, the reservists had their own game strategy that proved to be just as effective to intimidate the officials. The Cleveland reservists' plan was working as they pressured the officials to overlook blatant fouls. The reservists persuaded the referee to end the first half a minute early when Pitt was in possession of the ball near the Naval goal line. Kind of odd indeed. And if that was not bad enough, the officials did more than make up for the lost minute in the first half by extending the final period by 6 minutes. It really got interesting in this extra 6-minute stanza, as it was mainly extended due to the Naval Reserve having possession of the ball and trailing the Panthers. It seemed like the extended ball game would be ended when the Naval offense coughed up the ball and Pitt gained possession, but the reservists would literally not admit that they fumbled the ball away, and they would not relinquish possession of it. There was a heated argument, and finally a very frustrated Pop Warner told his players, "Just play it out!" And they did. A few plays later, Cleveland's Naval reservist Moon Ducote won it as he passed a scoring strike to the receiver Pete Stinchcomb, and Pittsburgh's 4-year undefeated reign was at a very controversial end indeed. That's a very interesting game, and probably one that we may do some further study on, as it really has an impact on football history. Now, Michigan and Navy were also playing very well. Another solid program in 1918 was that of the Michigan Wolverines. They went undefeated in all 5 of their games that year as a group of freshman players filled the holes left by upperclassmen who had left early to serve their country. The 5 victories were, for the most part, good quality wins as the Wolverines defeated the likes of rival Ohio State, Michigan State, Case, Syracuse, and the Amos Alonzo Stagg coached University of Chicago. Navy, unlike their Army rivals, did field a full season squad in 1918, and they had success that year too, as they suffered only one setback. And similar to Pitt's, it was a very controversial one, as it stirred the pot of controversy, not their opponent. The Naval Academy loss was to Great Lakes Sailors team that made up of ex-collegiate players who opted for the military during the wartime era. Navy was out in front 6-0 and ready to punch another score when they fumbled deep in the Great Lakes red zone. Harry Eelson picked up the loose ball for the GL Sailors, and he started on what appeared to be an easy 90-yard touchdown run. But on his way, the Navy sidelines about midfield stripe, he encountered an unlikely obstacle. A player on the Navy bench, tackle Bill Saunders, left the sideline confines during the fumble return and dropped Eelson to the grass with a great tackle. Eelson's teammates ran up to him to help him up to continue his run after the very illegal stoppage, but officials stepped in and ended the play. It was a very confusing and bewildering experience for the officiating crew, I'm sure, as really there was no rule set up to punish this obvious rule offense. And their first attempt to correct the situation was to award the Great Lakes squad a half the distance to the goal, but this was changed later and awarded a score for the Great Lakes team. The Sailors made the extra point count as they earned a 7-6 victory over their naval opponents. The ruling by the officials set up some of the precedents that we find today in the football rule on the spirit of the rules for the circumstances that occur that no clear-cut rule is written. Now, these men who officiated a game should be applauded for their accolades nearly 100 years ago, as they prevailed with fairness in what I'm sure was a very uncomfortable situation. It should be a lesson and inspiration to all of us that creating a safe and level playing field is our main responsibility when taking the field to officiate football and all other sports. And yes, in today's rules, if somebody comes off the bench and makes that, a score can be awarded even though they didn't cross the goal line. And that's really what these officials did. Now, the top professional teams of 1918. Well, the Spanish flu pandemic of World War I caused many pro squads not to be able to even field teams that season. But one franchise that did and made the most of it were the Dayton Triangles. The Dayton club finished with a perfect 8-0 record and won the Ohio State title. Now, to learn more about 1918's Dayton team, and join our friend Bruce Smith on his Dayton Triangles podcast, Episode 9, The Year of the Asterix. And I guess we should comment that there really was no national championship awarded in 1918, but in hindsight and years later, that both Michigan and Pittsburgh were awarded a co-championship by many different governing bodies that look back at those sort of things. So I guess that's what we'll consider is just both Michigan and Pitt were both national champions that year in college football. So we hope you enjoyed this little bit of history from 1918 and the very odd and unique year of 1918 with flu pandemic and World War on the horizon for the United States, but they still played football, the game we love, and it still gave peace of mind to the fans and the citizens that were involved in all these great world troubles and depressions that could have set in. But sports is a great unifier and a great pacifier and helps us get through some of these tough times. And just like was proven, days after 9/11 with football and baseball being played, and many other instances where sports really helped settle and make the nation forget for just a few moments the troubles that were on hand around the world and at home. So we hope you enjoyed this little bit of history. Hope you join us each and every day for more great football history here on PigskinDispatch.com, because we do this every day, 365 days a year. If you have any comments you'd like to share with us, write us at pigskindispatch@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook, as well as most other social medias. We're under the banner of Pigskin Dispatch. So till tomorrow, everybody, have a great gridiron day. That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Jean Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our broadcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? You should check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Pictorum Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. Instead of a boring old tie, get him a historic baseball photo taken by Henry High Sandom at the historic Polo Grounds Stadium in New York City during the 1894 Temple Cup. Or, if he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL poster. These are so good looking that you'll be amazed how they turn out. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order.